Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money with Tony Stewart. I'm pleased to be joined today by Lesli Doares. Lesli is a men's marriage coach and author. In this episode, we'll be discussing Lesli's thoughts on how we change the way we think about money in marriage. Lesli, welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you and get into this. So, let's start out. What is your origin story?
Love that question. Very, very convoluted, and it might be of interest to your listeners that my very, very first job out of college was working for Merrill Lynch back when Merrill Lynch existed in their back offices. I was not a broker, but I was in their back office. So I've kind of been around money my whole life. Then I took a detour into retail. That was a whole nother nightmare. And then I ended up becoming a marriage and family therapist. And one of my very, very first clients was brought to me when she was 6, and she suffered from anxiety. Well, of course she did, because she was the figurative rope in her divorced parents' tug of war. And so as I'm working with this little girl, trying to figure out how can I help her? Because, what tools do I give a 6-year-old? I realized I needed to start working with the parents. And I kept trying to get in earlier and earlier into relationships because, the findings are that the level of our happiness is determined by the health of our relationships. And if you're going to get married and if you're going to have children, neither one of those things are necessary, but if you're going to do either, then I'm a real believer of helping people understand what it is they're getting into, what makes it work, because believe it or not, we actually do have information about what makes relationships work, and then really trying to help people apply that. So it's kind of been this very long, convoluted thing. But when I was working with this little girl, she reminded me a lot of me. My parents started to have difficulty that I became aware of when I was 8. They finally divorced when I was 15, and actually when I was 16. My dad left when I was 15, and so that being in all of that kind of turmoil and not feeling like I had any power. It impacts us. And so the whole thing is to help people understand how it impacts us and then give them the tools to actually do it better.
Well, that's really interesting. There's so much depth there. I especially resonated with me. The level of our happiness is determined by the strength of our relationships.
Yep.
And I think that does trace back to all facets of our lives. So that's a really good point. One of the things you're doing is the Hero Husband Project, and that's super interesting. Please share with us, what is the Hero Husband Project?
Well, it came about because, as I said, I'm a marriage and family therapist. I got into coaching a few years ago because therapy has some real challenges. I happen to live in the southeast of the United States, where therapy is a 4-letter word. People don't like, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and yada, yada, which isn't very effective. And a lot of what I do with my clients is I educate them on what works, what doesn't work, coach them through the skill sets. And through the years, I discovered that most of the couples, because for a long time I was a couples therapist, you know, I saw that the men were really good guys. They were good fathers. They were good providers. They were just a little bit behind the eight ball when it came to their marriages. And the way that I look at it is there's a lot of support out there for women. There's not quite as much support out there for men. And if we want to create strong, healthy relationships, families, children, budding adults, as I like to tell them, we don't raise children, we raise adults, we can't ignore 50% of the population. And so that's where the Hero Husband project came from, because most men want to be the hero in their wives and their children's lives. And unfortunately, a lot of the way they're told how to do it is not going to work. So that's really where I developed this.
Boy, that sounds like financial services where 50% of the population women are overlooked.
Yeah.
That's so amazing.
See how that works, right?
Yeah, and I think, I think the really impressive thing about what you're doing is that bringing everybody into the conversation and making it inclusive, because, in all these areas, the people that are excluded still want to participate and are able to participate if given the opportunity.
Right. Yeah. Given the opportunity, given the support. And that's the other thing is that, one of my, I call them Leslieisms, and one of my current ones that's actually been one of mine for a while is that nobody has to take a relationship 101 class, and everybody should. Just like I think everybody should have to take a financial management or understanding this, because these are such big aspects of our lives that, if we don't know what works, if we don't have the tools, then, we're going to struggle a lot more than we need to.
I love that. I got to write that down. If we don't have the tools, we are going to struggle. And I think that's applicable to so many things that people tend to overlook, that it's the basics, it's the fundamentals. And if you have those, you can, maybe not 100% succeed, but be well on your way to success. So I think those are such important principles. So let's talk, just real quick before we get into the financial questions is, let's talk about your book. Is what inspired you to write Blueprint for a Lasting Marriage?
Well, somebody who I like to consider, a mentor, which when he made this suggestion, I really was like, okay, I'm not sure I like him anymore. I was actually at a conference, and the main speaker was a man named Bill O'Hanlon, who is a prolific author. He's a reformed therapist, and he's written over 30 books. And I was having a conversation with him, and he was basically saying everybody has a book in them. And I was saying, Bill, all of the books about marriage have already been written. And he looked at me and he says, yours hasn't. And I went, okay. So that was and after I wrote that one, I swore I wasn't going to write another one, but I have, because I now have one based on the Hero Husband. So it's kind of like, and I probably will never do one again, only because it can be extraordinarily painful. But I really wanted a manual. I really wanted to give people a tool where it's all kind of laid out there. I talk about what constitutes a good marriage, and then I also talk about the 5 most common challenges to marriage, which is communication, intimacy, children, friends and family, and of course, finances, because that's a big area where couples really have to learn to work together if they're going to be successful.
Yeah, no, I love that, especially on the finances, is because that's overlooked. And I think a lot of couples, sometimes they do separate finances and they don't really merge them or talk about them. And then they're off they're not really, I guess, married
Right.
in that sense. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but
Well, my viewpoint is, and I talk about this, that if you are going to have a successful marriage, you cannot opt out of a major aspect of it. And there's a lot of times where, where I will talk with people where one partner is in charge of the money because the other one, I don't understand it, right? It's too complicated or whatever, and so they're basically abdicating responsibility. But then of course, if things don't go the way that they think they should, then then the other person gets mad. It's like, well, but you're not participating. So this is really the damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. It's like, well, you're leaving me to make all the decisions, and then you get angry when either you're not included or I make a decision you don't like. Then participate. But it's like,
yeah.
So it's
no, I'm with you 100%. Yeah, I encourage people to have family financial meetings. That it's okay for one partner to sort of, manage the money as long as they're reporting to the other partner and
right, as long as the other person
decisions.
knows what's going on, right? It was funny because years ago, my husband was working for a company, and I'm really dating myself here because automatic depositing of paychecks, and that created a huge uproar in his company because many of the hourly employees who were male didn't want that paycheck to automatically go because they had not been being completely honest with their partners about how much money they made. It's like if they made overtime, then that was kind of shunted off, and it's like, so I mean, and my husband was shocked because he and I have always, we don't have his money and her money, we have our money, and so he was really shocked by this, and I'm going, yep, people do things differently, hun.
Yeah. That's the best way to put it. People do things differently. So that's awesome. And I think it does tie into those things. And I love what you're saying about a blueprint, because I think that is so important. And I do have listeners who ask me, like, should I write a book? And so I love what you say, is because I've heard the same thing when I wrote my first book. As somebody told me, it's like, you'll know when it's time. Everybody has a book in them. It just is, if you want to get out your unique message. And I think that's the value. And that's the value of reading different authors as well, is that people are going to have different messages, different perspectives, and something will resonate with them. So, congrats on writing a book. Number 2.
Number 2. Well, you know what that's like. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have another one in process, and it's just like, did I want to do another one?
Yep. I hear that.
So, so let's talk a little bit about financial literacy and financial preparedness.
Right.
Why do you think, why is financial preparedness important in your work?
Well, because, it's a reflection of people's thinking and beliefs. And I was told a long time ago by somebody that money is not dollars and cents. Money is the meaning that we ascribe to the dollars and cents. And so a lot of times people have very different ideas about what money is. And so being able to talk about that, not from a judgmental standpoint, because it's just information, but, because money can be security, money can be independence, money can be love. Money can be all kinds of things to people. It can be status. It can be, but if you don't know what it is to you, then you're having arguments about the dollars and cents. But if you don't know what is underneath that, then you're not really getting at the heart of what's going on. And so, and money is about both what we do now and what we want to do in the future. And, so being literate about it and being able to go, if we want to be able to do this thing, buy a house, go to Europe, retire, whatever it might be, we have to have, what's our plan? How do we get there? What's the best way to do this? I remember talking with somebody many, many years ago, and he and his wife, boy, I could not have done this. They wanted to buy a house, and so I think he said for 2 years, they pretty much ate nothing but peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I went, love ya, couldn't do that. But they had come up with a plan, right? And so you have to find a plan that works for both of you. Otherwise, you're going to create hurt, misunderstandings, resentment if we haven't talked about this. And this is really why being able to have this conversation is so critically important. But again, we don't always know what it is, right? And so
no, and I love that. And I think people do need to remember what you said is that, money is about more things. It's not, it's who we are is reflected in our financial decisions. And so it does come back to that. So what basic money concept do you wish people knew?
Well, the one that I really want them to know is that it isn't just about the dollars and cents. It's about what's underneath it, what money means to them. And then there's a kind of a corollary to that. And what's their money story? What did they learn about money growing up? Because a lot of people have no idea, right? It's like, I didn't know growing up what, I could look at the house I lived in. I could look at the cars, but I had no idea what actually was going on behind the scenes. Now, and again, I don't think necessarily that children need to know that, but I definitely think the adults need to know that is, what are we doing and why? And to understand the very, very fundamentals. I remember having a conversation with my daughter. She was in elementary school, so maybe she was 9. And she was talking about credit cards. And it's like, well, you just hand them your credit card. It's like, well, yes, but you eventually have to pay that, because that, of course, didn't make sense to her. She had no concept of what a credit card was. She just knew that mom whipped it out and we went home with the stuff. She had no idea that I actually had to pay for that stuff that I didn't pay for in that moment. And so just basic literacy of what it is. One of the things, and this, it's like the magic of compound interest. These things that, these very basic concepts, but also formulated around what about these concepts matter to me? Because it's one of the foundational pieces when we grow up. And we just kind of absorb that by osmosis, but it actually is the lens through which we practice money management, or, and we can see things like, when after mom and dad would have a fight, mom would go to the mall and, buy out all the stores. Okay. So it's what does this mean, and how it impacts our relationship with money today and with our partners.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think more people are starting to talk about that in the financial services world, is that, our past experiences and what we, how we grew up with money have large impact on how we make our decisions or put off the decisions that we make.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's
role
like
modeling.
right. If you look at, children of the Depression, they would either continue to be completely frugal, right, because they remember that horrible not having, or they would go completely the opposite way. And it's like, I'm never going to worry about money. It's like, was deprived as a kid. I'm not going to do this now. And it's like, yes. And there's consequences, benefits and consequences to both ways of thinking about things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's, yeah, thinking about my own parents and, how they approach things, and it was very different. One on each end of that spectrum. So.
Yeah, and then that's and that's always the thing is like, oh, my partner sees it this way, I see it this other way. How do we negotiate so that we can come up with a plan that both of us can feel good about? Like me not eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 2 years, that I would not have been on board with that plan.
Yeah, and that's a key. I mean, well, marriage is more obviously your field of expertise, but for me, it's compromise, and being able to come out with a workable plan that both of you can live with. So.
Yeah, I'm going to modify that a little bit, because I don't use the word compromise, because to me, compromise is you give up something, I give up something, we meet somewhere in the middle. And it's the giving up that can be the anchors, that can be the problems. It's here's 10 options of how we can move forward. What's the one that fits best for both of us? We're choosing not giving up. We're choosing path number 2 because it's the one that fits the best for both of us. Because a lot of times when there's compromise, that just opens the door for resentment to come and take a seat.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And, and that can be applied to the financial world too, is because that often happens when somebody proposes a product and, somebody feels like, you kind of pushed me into that a little bit. And that leads to that resentment. So I can see how that definitely transfers to marriage.
Yeah.
We could go down that road for quite a while.
Oh, yeah.
So Lesli, what's one simple thing people can do each year to set themselves up for financial success?
Well, I think they have to, one, they need to come up with a plan, and then they need to review that plan, right? Is it still working? Has something happened? Has our goal changed? Maybe we've reached a goal faster than we intend, but faster than we thought we would. So circumstances have changed. I mean, I think that it's really important, just like we get performance appraisals at work. We need to do we need to do an appraisal. Is this still working? Where do we want to tweak? Do we want to reevaluate our goals? Maybe we've had that trip to Europe, or maybe we've got a kid either starting college or finishing college. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into these things, and if we are being conscious of what we are doing, being intentional about what we are doing. I mean, we've seen it over many years of the volatility, in the financial markets, and people are, if people don't understand them, or they don't know, they get caught in the fear factor, because fear, by the way, is the most powerful emotion on the planet. It's designed to keep us alive. It can also make us do things that are not in our long-term best interest, because if I'm afraid, I only need to be alive in the next 5 seconds. I can't think 5 years from now, but what I do in the next 5 seconds is going to impact 5 years from now. And if we're consistently talking about this, creating a plan, tweaking this thing, then we can it can kind of contain that fear. It can contain those emotional things about, oh my gosh, inflation is blah, 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 and eggs are this and gas is that. And I mean, it's like, okay, breathe. It's like, yes, those are true. But what does that mean for us in the moment right now?
That's great. Great advice. Start a financial column. But that's really it. When you talk with clients, and as an advisor, been there, and you get those calls from clients and they're reacting to something rather than planning something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing, is to always take a step back and say, okay, what does this mean? Is this the right decision, rather than being driven by any emotion?
Right.
But yeah, fear is a huge driver. So let's switch up to habits. What's one habit that people can change when it comes to their money?
Boy, that's a that's a big question. I think be more honest about it, which is, sounds simple, but this is where these things come in. This is where our experience, our money story, our beliefs, this all comes into play. And trying to get clarity about why I'm doing what I'm doing. And again, it can be really, really challenging. But it's getting down to basically am I living my values through my actions, through my financial actions, through my relationship actions, through, and being able to have regular, calm conversations with our partners. Money is very personal. The reason why money and sex are the two things couples fight about the most is because they are probably the two most personal things that show up. And and in order to actually have really good conversations about them, we have to be willing to be vulnerable, which means there has to be a level of trust and there has to be a level of honesty, self-honesty and other honesty.
Yeah, that really resonates with me too, is because I think that's something that advisors struggle with, is getting their clients to open up about what they really want to do. The clients parcel out the information or only go so deep, and then the advisor has a hard time making a recommendation. So, for people who are listening, if you're an advisor, this is your reminder to really ask good questions, make sure your clients are comfortable. But if you're a consumer, that you have to find an advisor that you're comfortable opening up to, and give them enough information.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things that, because you guys have access into that one very major aspect into people's lives, and learning how to kind of going back. It's like, okay, let's pause here, because I'm hearing this, but I'm hearing this other thing from your partner. I mean, and a lot of times financial people only get one person, which makes it even more complicated, because you're guessing about what's happening with the other person. And again, this is where I go, you can't, it's not productive. It's not functional to opt out of a major aspect of the relationship, and your financial life is a major aspect.
Yeah, that gets back to what we were talking about earlier. No, that's powerful. So what money myth are you trying to break?
Well, one money myth that I really like to break is that it's your money versus my money. It's all our money. And there's a corollary to that, which is the who contributes, contributing financially, because there's a lot about, because sometimes I contribute financially by not spending money. not having money go out. I might not be contributing on the inflow, but I'm certainly contributing on the outflow. And so, and I guess, that money in and of itself is a tool. It's how do we want to use it? And am I willing to open myself up? And by the way, this is true of any aspect of marriage. Am I willing to open myself up to my partner's perspective? Not to say I have to adopt it, but can I at least be open to hearing it, because it's going to tell me what matters to my partner. It was funny, my father-in-law, not a particularly demonstrative or verbally emotional person, but again, he was a child of the Depression, and he would, when my husband and I would come to visit, on the way out the door, he'd slip me $100 bill. Infuriated my husband. And I said, honey, he is telling us he loves us. Take the money and be quiet. Because for him as a child of the Depression, that was a true act of love. We didn't need it, but it made him feel good to give it to us. So so it's understanding where people are coming from about money.
And no, I love that, because I think that's something also that people miss, is that, we all have a different viewpoint of money and how it should be used or managed or whatever you have. So, let's go back in time now. What advice would you give your younger self if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about money?
To start sooner. When I went off to college, I didn't even know how to balance a checkbook. Which again, for those people who don't even know, now checkbooks are don't even exist. But to really, I think, to learn more about how money works, what money is. I got myself into a little bit of financial trouble, not bad, but it was just like, I need to budget. Budgeting is not fun. Budgeting feels restrictive, but in some respects, budgeting can actually be freeing. And, and it actually makes us be more intentional, and anything that helps us be intentional, I think, is a good thing. And so probably starting to be more intentional earlier.
I love that. And that's what I hear from a lot of people is, that's starting earlier. And I would agree with that is, especially when you're young, you don't think too much, because 60 seems like it's a long ways away when you're 20 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And it is.
It is.
So, to close out, what is your number one tip on changing the way we think about money?
My number one tip, again, that it's about our belief, what we think about money, how we interact with money, is really about our beliefs about it, and as opposed to seeing it as a tool. And I really think that when we can step back and see, okay, money is just a means to something. It's not the thing itself. And again, it gives us clarity about our own values, our own beliefs, our own experiences, not in a bad way. I'm not about remove the self-judgment. It's what we've been taught. And it's just, so the question is, are we open to looking at those thoughts, beliefs, actions as, are they helpful in the circumstance we're in now? So going back to, experience of the Depression, that was a huge experience. We've had even the housing crisis of the mid 2005, that whole thing. That was a huge upheaval, and it's an opportunity to go, okay, what do I want to take away from this? What do I want to learn? What beliefs am I still holding around these things? What fears or other emotions do I have around this? And how do we separate out those emotions from the actual dollars and cents?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think that's challenging for people because emotions do tie into money. And that's the other thing that you said that really resonated that I talk a lot about is removing the self-judgment, from the money shaming. There's so many things that are put onto it.
Yeah.
That, whatever decisions you make are the decisions that are right for you. And if you do something you regret later, you can always change it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but again, getting that understanding of, is this moving me forward, or is this, and again, we're all going to make mistakes. There's, but it's am I willing to learn? What lesson can I take away from this? And here's something else. If it is a challenge, find a mentor, find an advisor, find somebody who can give you an objective opinion, not necessarily telling you what to do or not to do, but to maybe ask help you answer some questions that you may not have even known to ask. It's interesting. I had a client many years ago who, they were constantly fighting about money and blowing the budget. And I finally said, what is going on? And he said, well, every time she goes to Target or the grocery store or Walmart or someplace, she buys some crap for the kids. Okay. So I looked at her and I said, what's going on? And she said, he's right. But it turned out that when she was growing up, her parents got divorced. She and her mom had to go back and live with grandma and grandpa. There wasn't a whole lot of money. And anytime there was, the grandma and grandpa would take her to the store and buy her something. So she equated money with love. And so he's talking about the budget, which was perfectly legitimate. And she's like, I'm showing the kids that I love them. Two totally separate conversations. And until we dealt with the love conversation, the emotional conversation, there was no way we were ever going to get to the budgeting. Because that's how deep this is. And it was like, oh, as soon as she said this, what she was doing made perfect sense to me. He was still struggling a little bit with it, but it's like, well, okay, we just have to figure out a different way that is conducive to what your overall goals are, which is not blowing the budget every month.
But fitting in her perspective, and what's valuable to people. And I think that's a thing that's so often missed in the world of finance is that, it is about what people want to accomplish, what they're comfortable with. So right. I love the perspective. So, to wrap up, where can people find out more about you, and where can they pick up a copy of Blueprint for a Lasting Marriage?
Well, they can get Blueprint for a Lasting Marriage from Amazon or Barnes and Noble, not in the stores, but on the websites. And they can go to my website. I actually have two, www.foundationscoachingnc.com. That's my big one. And then I also, if they're interested in the Hero Husband Project, that's www.theherohusbandproject.com. So there are two websites, but that's basically where they can learn more.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching or listening, I will have links to Leslie's books and to her websites in the show notes. Lesli, thank you so much for coming on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Tony. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is a fantastic conversation. And everybody, thanks for tuning into the Get Ready Money podcast. Please be sure to subscribe. Thanks.